Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. The idea for the webinar today was to just go through some of our example files. This was a suggestion that someone had made a while back. I don't know, maybe it's someone who's online today, to just, to not have to have a specific topic every time we do this, but to also just show you how some of these files are made. Just go through the step-by-step examples. Picked out some that are on my list. Someone had suggested that Winrow's diagrams, which are kind of an interesting plot, and there's probably multiple ways to make them in DataGraph, but we can walk through the way that it's the way that it's done using the py command. Okay, so first of all, one thing that might be interesting would be if you take a moment and think about, do you utilize the example file? So right now you see the window where we have these. One of the things that we have actually been talking about for a while, and we are going to do in the very near future, I think this will be in the next version, is to have some categorization of these files, because I know when we first started, I think we had just under 100. Now we're up to 183. And the great thing about these files for us is that when someone asks us a question and has a specific need, when we make a file to help that person to create a graph or to do some type of analysis, then we can very easily upload that file and get it onto the example files, this repository that we have. So it's very convenient for us, but we want it to be useful for you as well. So I guess that's just one general question is that I'd be curious about. How, do you use these? Are they useful? We've definitely heard, I've heard from some people that yes, they have found these great in various ways. And one of the things that we try and do is also have these be a learning tool. So first of all, I wanted to make sure that you're aware that this is a searchable list. I know it's right up at the top, but sometimes I know I miss things like this. So there is a search bar up at the top. And if you want to get some more basic or simple examples, then typing in the word simple will give you things that are a little bit more simple. I think I have some maybe that are labeled basic as well. But again, one of the things that we're going to be doing in the very near future is to have a button on this so that you can look at just more basic files versus more advanced data analysis. And also some of the files here that we have that use particular data sets. For example, there's a few using COVID data that are in here. So to sort of separate out those various case studies that we've done. The first thing that I want to do today is start with a, I'm trying to remember how to use there we go, okay. The first thing that we're going to do today is we're going to do a relatively simple one, and just to make sure we're all on the same page and can see how do we create these and how do you replace the data in these files. And again, I'll just go ahead and do a simple one, and a very simple file here that actually we have is just the simple scatter plot. This actually could probably have some more graphs in here. As you can see, the tiles will change to show you different graphs that are in the same file. This one just has one graph in it, but it's a very basic example, and again, can be used for showing you how to use the program, but also I'll just use this as an example for showing you how we replace the data and how do we create this in the first place. So one of the things, I guess, to be aware of as you're perusing these files is that we've added a tooltip to the commands themselves. So if you see over here, here's where my mouse is hovering. You can see I hover over the command and it will tell me that this is the points command. it's kind of maybe obvious for this one in terms of the icon, but if you, there's another example I want to do where I use the points command for labels, and then it doesn't look like a points command. So you'd need to hover over it to see what command it is. Now, a lot of what we do when we create these files is we create example data, and we often will just generate random sets of data. So looking at these two columns of data and also just looking at the graph itself, you can see these are pretty much random data. If you haven't seen this before, many of you I think have probably seen this, but I can highlight this column and click the space bar, and that will give me the distribution of this data. So right now, these are two number columns, but we've clearly generated a normally distributed set of data to go into this file. And so we can see the average value here, the standard deviation. So this looks like likely an average of 0 that was used to generate the data set and a standard deviation of 1. So how do we do that? Let me just show you that in a brand new file. And I don't have my keystrokes on, but I just used Command N to create a new file. And so I would start something like this by using the expression column. I'm going to click this twice and use a function to generate the random number. So this would be nrand is the function that we would use. And this would be 0 and 1, for example. Now, whenever you generate random data, it's going to ask you how many rows do you want to generate. And let's see how many, and the original one here, it looks like I have 200 rows. So if I go back to this one, I can go ahead and do the same thing, 200. And one of the things that's kind of cool about DataGraph is that if you're generating data like this, if you're creating your own files and you just want to generate some random data, then every column that you have can have its own random seed, which is kind of nice, because if you've ever done this in a computer code where you are going, stepwise through the code, you will often have to reset the seed again, and that can be kind of a pain. Anyway, so I have my first column of random data. I can do the second one, 200 rows. Again, move these around. I'm just going to call this X and Y. And again, this is a very easy example, but just for those of you who are newer to the program. And there you go, I have my scatter plot of the data. And if I change my random data, then I'm going to change what's in my scatter plot here. So let's see, anything else on this? So what I wanted to just show you is that now that I'm in this file, it's very easy to take this, these columns and convert them to numeric values. You can convert individual columns between data types by either, if I click the column and then right click on the column header, you'll see that there's the ability to convert to a number, to text, to binary. Really, typically just doing it as a number is just fine. And yet here I have two columns, so I can, just let me put my keystrokes on here so you can see this. I can hold the shift key down, click the second column, and when you want to convert multiple columns at once, use the gear menu that's on the data table itself, and then you can just change this to a number column, and now it's no longer a function, it's set to an exact value. Now, I guess in terms of the file here, one thing that we must have done is truncated these numbers, because you can see that there's only really 4 digits in the random numbers that are generated here. Here, my numbers are much, much, much longer. And so often what I do, and I'll actually just undo turning them into numbers, is I'll use an additional function and I will round the random number to some number of digits. Now, we just recently had the request for being able to add into the round function the number of digits that you want. Before, we were just multiplying by, if we wanted 2 digits, multiply 100, then divide by 100. But anyway, this makes that a lot easier. I can just copy and paste this again. So now, oh, there we go. So now I have random numbers that are, again, rounded. And when I select both of these, convert to a number, there you have my my data that I've generated. And if I wanted to take this data and put it into the other file, if for some reason I have that one formatted in a way that I really like, then I can easily copy these 2 columns of data and paste them over here. And now everything is updating. Again, it's basically the same graph. But the other thing that actually was a question that we had on the discussion board recently, I think this was the discussion board, was what if you have 2 columns that are expressions, but you want to paste them as data? Now, if I take these columns here that are expressions and I copy them and I bring them into my other file and paste them, it will paste in the expression itself, which maybe that might be what you want to do. But if you don't, then you can use an option that we have, which is under the edit menu, copy as text. And if you select that and then go into your new file and paste, then it will paste in the values themselves and not the function. So that may be a little bit confusing because copy as text maybe implies that it's a text string, but it's actually just what DataGraph saves is the underlying text representation of the numbers and then interprets that. So anyway, that's one option. You can also use the paste special option, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else here. I think that's it. I think let's go on to another file and see. Okay, so let's see, here's one question. Can you remind us of how we replace the underlying data without needing to redo all of the column equations? So I think if you mean just even here, if I wanted to go the other direction, I can copy these 2 columns, select the 2 columns, copy them, and then paste them into the other file, and it actually converts it from an expression into the number column. It will paste in the number columns. And since both expressions and number columns are really the same data type, they're both a numeric value, then it will work fine with the command that I have set up here. Okay, another question. Though if I didn't answer that one quite correctly, then let me know. How would you normalize this data to a different range, say 0 to 1? So there is an option for, it's actually 2 ways that you could do this at this point. So if you wanted to take this column of data and normalize it between 0 to 1, you can right click on the column and you will see down in the options, there are a number of mapping shortcuts. I've actually been thinking maybe we should change what this is called because we also have the map column that was added after this. But these are basically shortcuts for creating different expressions. If you therefore use this, there's actually a number of different really handy things that you can do here. So for example, scale from 0 to 1 is one of those things. And now this column is scaled between 0 to 1. And you can see this is just an expression where it's using the column property of the minimum value and the range in order to scale that from 0 to 1. So we could call this X as well. In fact, I'll do that because I want to show you something. And if I want to do the same thing for Y, I can do that also. I can scale from 0 to 1, the Y column. One thing that DataGraph does not enforce within the data table is it doesn't mandate that every column has to have a different name. This actually threw me off a little when I first started using DataGraph because I was so used to using databases that I was used to that concept or that restriction in a database that in a given data table, every column has to have its own unique name. Here, I can have an X column and an X column and a Y column. Now, what's being drawn within my graph is just whatever X I've selected. And you can always click on the menu to make sure what column is being selected for your data. But the reason I wanted to show you this is to show you a very handy tip. So if I placed these in groups, for example, like this. Oh, that's not gonna, actually that makes it a little tricky because I have not named, because these are still referring to the original ones. It doesn't want to do that. Okay, so I would have to use a, refer to the columns in this group. Let me go ahead and just do this, like I'll do it this way. So I can have the X and Y that are being used in these expressions outside of the group. This will work. And then this is my scaled version. And what I wanted to show you is that when you're replacing data and you're using these templates or example files, that one of the things I do all the time is if there's a command that I want to replace columns that have the same name, then you can place those new columns in a group and just simply drag that group and drop it onto your graph. Now, it may have been hard to see, but that changed the data. Could make this a solid point. So I could go back. Let me just undo that, actually make these solid points. So if you watch the data and maybe watch the scale in particular, you can see here how it goes from 2 to, well, in this case now -3. So if I'm bringing the new data and dropping it on there, now my X and Y axis scales are all going between 0 and 1. Now we did add a new functionality. Now this is going to actually break what I have with that one without adding a link to that data. But let me just show you a kind of a cool functionality. So if I have my X and YY in a group and I click on the gear menu, then there's a normalize option that I can click. So I place these two columns in a group. I'm going to click the gear menu on the group itself and then say normalize. And when I do that, it's now creating a scaled, normalized, that's what it called it here, normalized version of the X and the Y. Actually, I guess I can place this scaled group in here, and that the one that I did manually column by column, and you can see that these are the same data sets. And then it won't really change the results, but you'll see which one is there. So if you have, and this was I guess this is really just still in the beta, because if you have, I don't know, dozens of columns and you want to scale all of them at the same time, that could be really time consuming to do them all individually. So that's why we added this ability to scale all the data like that at once. Okay, so let me see. I see that there was a question. If I create a data graph plot in which the data is ported into DataGraph, fills 2 columns, and then I compute 8 additional columns, how can I replace the 2 columns of input data without needing to retype the various expressions used to generate the 8 columns? So in something like so I think I understand what the question is, that you have 2 columns of data, you have a number of expressions that are built on those columns, and you want to update the expressions. And I guess the issue would be if your expressions, if the 2 columns of data that you're bringing in don't have the same names in the headers, then that is kind of an issue. And there's a couple of workarounds that we use that I use all the time, and some of the example files I know use this as well. And that is to use a column that's a redirect. So this allows you to create an alias. So I think I'm sort of onto what the question is. So say, for example, I have a completely different data set that I want to bring in. And maybe I can even just find I don't know, we'll open this one, simple data set. So here's an X. Well, this also happens to be called X and Y. So this would be easy, right? If I take this data and I copy these 2 X and Y columns, then I can place them in here, and everything is going to be updated because the columns have the same names. What I have been doing is using a redirect column, where the idea is really to have the data and the calculations very separate from one another. So I'll put this data into a group. Now, all of my equations are going to be broken because those expressions are looking within this group for an X and a Y, and there isn't one that exists. But if I have a redirect column, then I can pick what column I want my X to be. I can pick the column I want my Y to be. And they all happen to be the same names, but they don't have to be the same name. So if this is, I don't know, data 1 and data 2, then I can have my input data have any name that I want. It's being redirected, or kind of an alias, to call it an X and a Y. But all of the equations will update. Oh, maybe I don't. So it sounds like maybe I'm still not exactly understanding the question. I want to update the 2 columns of input data and have DataGraph automatically regenerate the following 8 columns. I don't know. Maybe you're going to have to. Maybe this is something where you would use a scripting approach, like we talked about last week. And so I don't know. I might not be quite answering your question on that. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Someone was just saying, and made that comment. Yeah, if you ask your questions to everyone, then everyone can read what the questions are. And sometimes the audience does a better job at interpreting questions than I do. So that's a great suggestion. I often try and remind people of that. If you can ask questions and send them to everyone. The expressions are updating. Yes, the expressions will update automatically when you paste new data into it. Yes, everything is. But again, the expression columns are limited to looking. This expression needs a column called X in order to calculate what's there, and it will update completely automatically. But it has to have a column named X in order to do that. Okay, let's go ahead and go on to another file that And again, if someone wants to nominate a file, then you're welcome to do that. But one that I did recently that I thought was kind of interesting is this file here. So in case you didn't quite see, I did that maybe sort of quickly. So this is a file called a layered bar graph. So if you just typed in bar graph, for example, then you'll see a whole bunch of different examples. But this layered example I thought was kind of interesting. This was, again, something that someone had requested, and I felt like it combined some interesting aspects of the program. And partly because there's, different ways to do this. So if you look at this, the temptation may be, first of all, to use the bars command. And I know that's different by just one letter, but the bar and the bars are very different commands. There's actually an article on the help that describes this more. But what you see here is a data set where we have seven different days. We have dates. There's a budget, there's units, and then there's a calculation value that's in here. So just to give us some data. And what's being compared is the budget to the actual. So rather than doing this as a side by side, overlaying the two bars one on top of the other gives kind of an interesting representation, and also again points out the layering, the way that DataGraph works, where every command is actually a layer that's drawn on top of the prior commands that are in the list. And again, so if I opened this file, one of the first things I do if I was trying to understand how this was done is to hover over the command, and you can see that this is a bar command, plot individual bars at specific locations on the X, or it doesn't say X axis, but it could be X or Y axis actually. And this is also a bar command here. The difference between these two is the fact that one has a width of 0.5 and the other one has a width of 0.25. So if I change this, you can see which command this is. You could adjust this further. The other thing that's very helpful to make sure you're using to try and understand different commands is the hide and exclude buttons over here. It's maybe sort of obvious from these commands, but if you just click the hide, then that helps you to identify what command, what data or what part of the graphic the particular command is controlling. So to do a bar command, we would do that under the command menu currently. Here's add bar. The bar command is not in the default toolbar, but let's see what else I want to say here. I guess, so the other thing to notice here is the x-axis. So on the x-axis on this graph, you can see how it's just the days 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then there's one here by date that shows the actual date along the axis. And this is the other thing that the bar command allows us to do. It allows us to place a bar along a numerical axis where you have bars, again, at different locations, and then therefore can also have a date axis along the x-axis. So the first example, or the first graphic that we have here, is using the day, which is actually the same as the row number for the location of the bar. So if I take my budget, I can highlight this one column and say command add bar. And the bar command by default has very little formatting. I'll go ahead and expand this out, and I can add a fill and use a different color. And then I can also, what I often do is recently is removing the lines. It's sort of a more modern look to not have the lines, kind of looks nice. And then again, changing the width that you see here. Now that this command is created, I can click the Option key, drag that to make a copy, and I'm going to change this now to the actual data, and we'll make one a different width and change the line color. Oops, I put the wrong one behind. So now you can see both of these lining up, but the difference here is where they're located in terms of if you're comparing these graphs to what's happening in the ones where we have it by date. So here you can see the date column is used to specify where the bars are located. So it's in some ways the where is kind of like the X, but the command doesn't have a specific X and Y entry in the same way that you would for the points, because you can change it. It can go along the X-axis, it can go along the Y-axis. But here we can go ahead again and change this to date, and now you have the bars located at different locations. So not terribly complicated, but I don't know, I sort of like this example, but partly also I think that sometimes I feel like the bar command is more useful than the bars. The command for bars, just to maybe compare this, if I highlighted both of these columns and clicked on bars, then you get the standard side-by-side bar graph, and the X-axis is locating the bars based on the row location. I could change what's shown on the X-axis in terms of how it's labeled. So I could label it with the day, which is going to look the same. I could label it with the date, but it is not a numeric date axis. It's just a label. So that is really the main difference between these two commands. Is the side-by-side bars command is locating the bars depending on what row. So, we have this built-in row counter over here. It's using the row to locate where the bar is on our X-axis. And this field here allows us to label that, but it is not actually an actual numerical value. It's just labeling it. Let's see, what else did I want to say? Oh, so as a result, let's say I took this data and moved it around. So I can take this, highlight a couple of rows, and if you highlight some rows and click and drag to the right, then you now see a little floating image of that data, and you can move it to a different row. And notice when I do that, it's completely changing my bar graph, because now this data is located at row 9, row 10, row 11, and that's what it shows on my X-axis. If I wanted to move this back, I can do that, and then it would just sneak right back in there. But notice that didn't change the graph here. So when I take this and move some data, it doesn't change the data using, or the graph using the bar command, because again, it's locating the date properly on an X-axis. So the choice of which command you use, it's really just, it depends on your data and what you're trying to achieve. I find it very helpful that you have both options within DataGraph, but you just kind of need to know which one to pick depending on what you're doing. I guess the other thing here in this file is that you also have a line added onto this. You really, if you wanted to do the same thing here, again, you couldn't do it on the date because it's just, it wouldn't really make any sense. In fact, if I took this command and wanted to transfer it over to this graph, it's going to look very strange because it doesn't, it's not in the same Oh, well, actually, this is a double axis. That's one of the reasons. This is actually on a completely different axis. So what I did here was actually split the y-axis and then added the line graph for the using the plot command, and place that on the different axis, and then change that to join. So I'm doing this kind of quickly. I know if you haven't seen this before, then if you need me to slow down, definitely let me know. But this is how we create these types of double axes within DataGraph. There's a lot of there's other examples on our YouTube channel and things like that that show you how to do this. Okay, so the one thing I really wanted to make sure I got to is to look at the example we have for the windrows, because someone had requested that be something that we talk about. And this is definitely a more complicated template. There's actually two that have a similar that are these rose diagrams. There's the standard kind of windrows here, and then there's a recreation of the Florence Nightingale rose diagrams that is kind of an interesting graph that we made. But first, let me open up the windrows example here and talk about this file a little bit. So this is one of these examples actually where the data and the processing of the data are kept completely separate from one another. If you're not familiar with windrows, then actually let me show you. If you open this file, maybe in both of these, in just the first graph that you see here, this is actually a screenshot of what we were recreating within DataGraph. And if you go to this website that is linked here, then you can see this is the file. So I just took a screenshot of this and pasted it into my DataGraph file. So first of all, how do you do that? Well, really easily. If I do a screenshot of this, so I've just taken a screenshot, and then within DataGraph, I can say File, New Graph for Composition. Now I get this blank graph that I can paste in my screenshot. And I can scale this down a bit. I can anchor it in the center. But this, I do this all the time if I'm trying to recreate a specific graph or be inspired by some type of a graph. I place a screenshot into my DataGraph file so that I can have it as reference. And you can see that's exactly what we did here. Just sized this to a specific pixel range. And when you paste graphics in, they will show you the pixel size of the graph itself. So here, if you do 800 by about 800 in terms of the size, that's going to be proper. I scaled it down, so I can bring it back up again. Okay, so this how you would create the screenshot. Now, how did we do the actual graph here? This is a series of layered pie charts. And to understand this, I think maybe the first thing to recognize is a little bit about how the pie command itself works, because this certainly doesn't necessarily look like a pie chart, but that's what this is. Each one of these is a slice of a pie chart. So let me do a very simple example to start. And if I want to create a pie graph, actually, let me just add a number column here. And this would be my slice. Now, one thing to recognize is that if you think of these as all slices within a pie chart, they all have the same exact width, right? So they have a different length, but the width is the same. And the way DataGraph creates the pie charts is that it will depend on how many slices you have. It will divide equally up it will scale the pie chart depending on the amount given to each slice. So if I make the amount all the same, so here I just have 10 rows of 1, and I click a pie chart, now I get a pie chart with equal slices. And if I add more slices, then they're just going to be, again, each one is going to be equal. Now within the pie chart, I can change other things about my pie chart. I can change, for example, the width. So I think I'll just generate this with an expression column. Oops, I did that twice, but just wanted you to see what I did. So I made an expression column, and I could set this equal to the row number, for example, if I just type in the row number symbol that I have here. And well, I have 21, so I'll just go ahead and stick with that. So if this was going to be my and really width is thinking about the width or diameter within the pie itself. We'll just call this column W, and then I can select that column. So now you can see, well, maybe you can't really see, but they have different sizes, but it's very, very small because the width is in pixels, basically. So this is setting each one to a pixel size. So as a result, these are pretty small numbers. So I want to scale this up to something bigger so I can actually see the various sizes here. And the other thing that I can do here is I can also change the color from being a different color for each pie to a single color for each one. Again, if you're not quite used to the program, these colors that you see in this color menu are things that you can, we customize those through the style settings. So the actual color tiles, you can change the colors that are shown here. And I changed these tiles to match the color from the graph that you see. In fact, for this one, I would have used the colored dropper to go into this. I'll just show you this very quickly. If you expand the style settings and click on any tile, then you get the color picker. There's the eyedropper here where you can say, okay, this is the color I want to use for this tile. And if I change that, now it's set to the color there. Now, actually, I don't want to do that because this is something I already had. There we go, had set up. But in any case, that's how I matched the colors. And then this style setting is something that I set the same style across all the graphs that I have here. Oh, that actually changed my fonts there, so I don't actually want to do that right now. But in any case, that's how you can kind of move the colors around from one place to another. Okay, so this is sort of the roughly what how this works. And maybe I'll just do, we'll make this change a little bit. So if I leave this as the row number, but maybe divided by 2, and then say I have, again, another layer, then I can take this pie chart that I created, I'll option drag it to make a copy and have another column. So this would be my second column here. We'll make this one a little bit larger in terms of the width. and then I can, oh, actually, this is going to be the larger one would need to be at the top of the list. So I'll change this to W2, and then I want to change this color to a different value. And now you can see how these two are layered one on top of another. The other thing that you can do here, again, is if I change the line style to no line, that will remove it. But actually, I think maybe what I did with this one is made the line style just white. Yeah, that I think that is exactly what I did. So that when you do that, then you can see these, the spaces in between the actual layered pie charts. Okay, so that's the basic technique for how the windrows is put together. And if you go over to this data, let me hide the ones that I created. This is my new data. But if you look at this table, this is exactly taken from the website. So I can go to the site where, oops, let's see where, oh, it's in, sorry, in the first one. If I go to the website where we have this source of data and go to a different month, so maybe this is for the whole, yeah, oh, this is January to June is the first one. But let's, for example, view the data for just January. So take a moment to load this. So you can see the data is basically the same. This is the data that I have here. I can go ahead and copy all of this, including the headers. And now if I go back into DataGraph, I'm going to highlight all of these rows of data and paste. And now it's asking me to confirm, where do you want this data to be pasted? Because it looks like just one of the column headers was slightly different. So all I have to do is click here and drag, because you can see all the other names are the same. So it looks like it's going into the right place, and then click import. And now I've just replaced all the data for this particular graph here. But because there's this scaling factor, the scale that was used for the original graph, here we go, was a little bit different than the scale we would need here based on the maximum. It could probably make the template or this file a little bit more flexible in that regard, but you can see it was pretty easy to put the new data in and everything just updated. So that is the technique that we're trying to use more and more in these files. And if you go into the section where it has the data processing, then these first, let's see, A through F, these columns here, let me go ahead and show them. These are all redirect columns because again, if the column name changes, I didn't want that to have to impact the output of the graph. But here, you're just picking which input data column. So A is going to be the innermost pie chart. B is going to be, one around that, and the further out that we get, the numbers get higher. And if you look at now the next section, this is each slice of the pie. So here's a column using an expression where it has the number of rows are specified using a variable. So there are variables down here showing that there's 36 different directions, and that's set to the number of slices. So for example, if I go to the one that I have here, we could change this to say, let's see. Oh, no, sorry. In the data itself, it would be my new data. If you wanted to build this up. Oh, I see. I didn't have this actually set to an expression. So I would go ahead and add the expression here. Sorry if this is, make that also named slice. And, or sorry, named slice. It's going to be a 1, and it's going to have 36 directions. Okay, but it would need to be, I didn't quite do this maybe as elegantly as I had intended, but you can see now, again, I'm changing this. So now this has 36 different pies to it. And then each one of these is scaled in the way that I did for the simple version, where it's taking the actual value, multiplying it by a scaling factor, and then adding in this inner ring. So I'm allowing you to create kind of an intersection where you don't have any anything there, and it's all, everything is based on this scaling factors, so it scales properly. So again, it's just layering these values. There's some other commands here. Actually, if I go ahead and swap to show you maybe the commands a little bit more clearly, you can see how I just created a pie for each one of these. I'm trying to think of what else to show you here, but so it took a little bit of time to create all of these, but the nice thing is, again, once you create a couple of them and you have them in the way that you want them to be, when you just can simply use that option drag to make more copies, it makes it a lot easier for scaling up something like this. And so just usually trying to make sure the first one has the settings that you want as you continue, and then layering them one upon the other one. Any questions? I know I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking now, so maybe I should stop for a moment and see if you guys have anything else that you would want to talk about. Let me give you guys a moment to, if anyone else wants to ask anything. I guess the composition graph. Yes. So let me talk about that for one moment, since that was something that caught your attention. The graph window within DataGraph is, what am I trying to say? There's only one graphing environment, but you can have it set up in such a way that you don't see the X and Y axis range, and it makes it easier to do things like bring in a screenshot. So if I create a brand new file, for example, you're going to see how the graph by default will always have the box shown. Now there's different box styles that I can change. That's one of the options in the style settings, where there's the one box or just an axis box. Well, those are the same for that setting, only axis. Now you just see around the X and the Y. Actually, let me make it a little thicker so you can hopefully see. But if you want to just bring in an image, then you would you wouldn't want to see that. And when you add a file, oops, here we go, file, new graph for composition, then you're not seeing that X and Y. It's not a different drawing environment. It's just set up so it will look like this. And the way that we do that is by having the margins in the canvas settings. If you go into the canvas settings, you can set these margins to 0. And now that box is now just, you can maybe sort of see a shadow of it, but you're getting now a blank screen. You can also uncheck draw X and Y numbers, and now you get this blank canvas. So if I take a screenshot of anything, I can just go to this graph and paste it, and then it creates a graphic command with that screenshot and brings it into DataGraph. So there's a number of files. I think if you go in the example files that you'll find will have that that ability to look at the screenshot that I started with. Oh, I guess we didn't open this one. I'll just do this. Look at this briefly. There's a lot of information here on, how these are set up. This, I don't know if this is really this does not look like it's using redirect columns in the way that the other graphic did. But again, it's essentially the same thing where I'm layering these different pie commands. And if you look at the data, you'll see a column of just ones to indicate or to help create the individual slices of the pie that each have the same width in terms of the slice itself, same size. And this has the same thing. It has a scaling factor where I can change this size and adjust that. And the source of this data is also shown. So all the calculations are here. And yeah, so that's that one. Kind of an interesting file. And I guess one thing we didn't really talk about is how you can also create your own templates. So if you go under the DataGraph file menu, you'll see a from user template option. If you haven't created any templates there yet, then you should see a link to a help article that walks you through how to create them. Basically, what this is doing is there's a folder in your Finder, where mine just now opened up on a different screen, but there's a templates folder that you have on your computer, and you would drag a file that you've created from another location into this location within your system. When you do that, all of those files will be available as a template within DataGraph. And what's nice here is it also gives you a preview that pops up and shows you those different files. And I find that to be pretty useful as well. Okay. So is there anything else that anyone has on their mind, or any other questions? I wasn't sure how many files we would get through. I guess we didn't get through too many, but hopefully this showed you some new things or new ideas. And this is easy for us to do. So if there's other templates, I think we might do this again, where we pick a few. Maybe we can kind of let people know ahead of time what a couple of the graphs are that we're going to look at, and go from there. Okay, so I'm getting some positive feedback. That's good. Thank you. Yeah, so if this is useful, we'll do this again. And I think it will definitely be helpful when we have those categorizations of the template files, so that you really can work your way through Yeah, because there's a ton of stuff in here, but I know it's becoming more and more difficult with there's being so many different files to look at. You can search them, but still, it's a lot of different types of files. Actually, this is sort of one of the ones that I wanted to look at was, I think, where did this one? This one here. This is a simple file, drawing functions. This is an example where, again, I have, this is a, an equation that's in here just as an image so that you can see what equation I'm using in these functions, but it's just being input here as a graphic. This may be something I created in LaTeX actually, which means that I could, I believe I could edit it. But anyway, we'll do that. We'll do that for another time. I hope that everyone has a good weekend, and hopefully the construction noise outside my house did not come through to any degree. It's very loud here. Great. Okay, I'll go ahead and sign off. I guess the other, let's see. Great. Oh, good. Okay, so it sounds like people that this was helpful. I'm a little confused about my Zoom. I think I'm not sharing anymore. Oh, there we go. No, stop share. Okay, now I'm definitely not sharing anymore. Okay, so what else do we have going on this month? We have next week, we're going to be talking about time and how you represent time within DataGraph. We've on many occasions talked about representing dates, but I feel like we really haven't talked much about what if you just have data that's hours, minutes, seconds, maybe there's a date as well, but time is something that I know a lot of people have data that that is represented in time. We're also going to talk about the built-in time variable. So I think that'll be a fun webinar. And we'll have a webinar, our third one this month. We went ahead and I know we announced this one a little late, but we have the others announced. Will be actually, I have the books right here. We're going to be talking about 2 books by Bill Cleveland. So this visualizing data and elements of graphing data. I've been kind of looking at these books lately and getting inspired. So we'll talk about those. If you don't have a copy of either of those or are interested, then you might want to go ahead and grab one. But we'll be using some examples from that, the sort of classic texts in data visualization to in creating them in DataGraph. And we are also offering a new thing that we're trying out. We're going to have some paid classes. So these will be for a small group. And we announced that. I think you've probably seen that in the email. So if you're interested, definitely let us know. We think this will be useful for people who really want to get some more individual attention. And but you'll let us know if this is something that you're interested in. And or if you have other ideas, then certainly be interested in hearing that too. So anyway, I'll go ahead and sign off, and I hope everyone has a great weekend. Just seeing if there's anything else. Okay, great. Thanks, everyone.